face, they become violent or they become oppressive. And then they do something else that, Eric, you introduce the show kicking the can down the road, meaning finding someone to blame. Jimmy, when we had the protests, there are those who said it is you, among others, who are behind those protests. Some were even bold in saying that you funded the protests. In fact, I wanted to say, I know Jimmy, so maybe if he's funding the protest, I can also go to him and tell him, Jimmy, I also want to protest.
So fund me. 1 + 1 equals.
Good one. Now, in the time you have been in the company and you have done business with politicians and political entities, what has been your take when something that could have been discussed suddenly becomes violent?
A spotlight has been shown. Anytime a spotlight is shown on the truth of what is really happening, it is akin to what the Mzungu used to do. When we clamored for self-rule, what happened? People died. We don't even know the exact numbers.
No.
Entire communities were detained, taken off their land and detained. Why is it any different? It is no different.
Actually, taking off their land is putting it mildly. Their entire social structure and fabric was completely bastardized.
Yes.
Completely.
Yes.
The Swinnerton plan guaranteed that.
Correct.
Yes.
So how is it different? Our foundation was wrong in most things. We can say we can take home 1 or 2 good things about the colonial era, such as the education system and institutions of governance that we didn't have. Even saying that they drew the map called Kenya. And we're happy to be together with our diversity and our strength and our numbers. But in reality, we inherited a rotten system. It was never about pulling everybody together.
And it was so by design.
It was so by design.
Yes. So the system then, those that were in power then, they could see the winds of change coming.
Yes.
And they could see with this clamor for independence, there's something that these people want.
Yes.
And the net effect of it is overthrowing this system that we have.
Yes.
So let's run ahead of it.
Yes.
And find a way of managing it so that we protect ourselves and our status quo in another way.
Yes.
And they successfully did it.
Yes. I want to add something to that, Eric. Is that it's significant that you note that as they were so-called allowing us to have our independence, catalyzed by some of the things that were happening here, like the war in the forest, Mau Mau, what was happening on the world stage? We had gone from World War I, II, to now a new battle for them out there. Remember the scramble for Africa?
Yep.
Was because of the European battle amongst themselves. Right? Now, what was the new battle? There was a new battle with the sudden rise of Russia, China, and communism. And 2 ideologies were coming into play, capitalism and communism. And the view I can tell you to our great so-called Europeans was that if they do not let go of our great continent, we are going to be liberalized. Our freedom will come from the communist part of the world.
Yep.
They will arm us. They will make sure that we get our independence through them and adopt communism.
And so they
were getting ahead of even communism's growth. It had nothing to do with feeling that we are okay. And if you note on the continent, a lot of the countries that sort of started leaning towards them, that was the advent of major assassinations of presidents. City.
Or political leadership
Political leadership that stood out. It was not about Pan-Africanism.
No.
I think that was only in part. The main thing was that they had
to the East
communist
divide.
East leaning. And there are very many documented historical books that talk about the CIA specifically. It leaders.
Okay.
If you look at now multipartism, and I want you to just note the dates, the clamor for sub-Saharan Africa specifically to get into multipartism, in as much as we clamored for it here, it coincided with a very interesting historical point in the history of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. It was the end of communism. It's when the Berlin Wall was coming down, right? Russia was changing, right?
Yeah.
So-called one superpower was emerging.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing with that is that you say, okay, now that threat has gone. We now need time to rebuild our economy, right? And the problem is that we now have a lot of enlightened leadership in Africa who've understood us, who know us, who know where we are going,
Yep.
right? Now we need to send them into a different arena, which is,
Let them fight among themselves.
yes, divide and rule. Okay? So they don't focus on what we're doing, all right?
Yep.
As we don't focus on what we're doing, we grow, right? So they grow exponentially, right? What comes the next phase? Where are we now?
But Jimmy, there's a distinct
What's happening now?
difference.
No, let him tell us. So where are we now globally?
What's happening now?
What's happening now globally?
So as they grew, what did they send as their chain to us?
Debt.
Right? They grew financially. This is where World Bank, IMF, the printing of the dollar grew. The Western world, right? At our expense, at our exploitation, grew exponentially, especially in the finance world. And then they come back and they start talking about one reform after another, right? Creating situations where we cannot compete. Structural adjustment they started with, then globalization, then sijui nini, right? And as we are on our knees limping, right? Limping, they come and you offer you bailouts.
Yep.
Bailouts.
And aid.
Bailouts and aid.
And cloud your mind.
Yes. No, now that comes now is the new colonization. Now we want to change our energy source. These people have got about 40% of that potential. New colonization. Because it's not only climate, it is also minerals. Because you need battery life.
Yep.
It's minerals. New wave. The other thing we have, exploitation, is people. We have a young generation up until the year and the next 100 years. The young population is where? With us.
Yep.
You need them as
The
workers.
youngest continent on the planet.
Yes. It's a new wave. And unfortunately, just like those periods, we had our slave traders.
The local
We had our
Nyaparas.
home guards.
Yeah. It was not possible
Even-
to have it without local.
You have-
Yes.
You have come to my point, Jimmy, that throughout there's the overall owner of the system who can see the change
Yes.
and they appreciate the change
Yes.
and they run ahead of the change.
Yes.
And then there's a local player who is also in a way seeing the change and taking advantage of seeing where to position themselves.
Correct.
Now, the current leaders are your friends. All of them. Ruto, Uhuru, Raila, Kalonzo, they're all your friends. You
Yes.
have sat, you have had conversations, you have dealt together. Many. If you're seeing it, I put it to you, they have also seen it.
I don't think so.
I put it to you that they have also seen it.
I don't think so. I believe...
And not just them, but the system is preparing itself for the next, which is why I come back to that question I asked you. Are we sure of the clamor of the chain that we are going after, whether it's actually the chain that's going to give us the freedom, or are we going to be managed again
you know,
into our so-called freedom?
do you know, there are many people, even as the clamor for our independence came up, they'll tell you there were a lot of people who used to argue that the African is not ready to rule himself. All right? And I want to tell you, even today, those friends you're talking about, they do not see it as clearly as we're discussing here. They have been inculcated in a very different system.
Jimmy, what do they see?
What do they see?
Yes.
The politics of the 20th century.
But are we not looking at
I'm a Mugogo, okay, right, with my flock that is sitting at the table. Are you not seeing it?
But don't you don't?
We even have leaders who are going around the country talking about their own communities.
Jimmy, is it not
All
the
right?
same
And
situation?
saying,
Who's they?
What has changed?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
There really is no change.
yes,
Because
they
if we
don't
look-
see it.
If we
Eric,
if we look
I
at what
disagree with you.
happened many years ago, when we talk about the exploitation and the extraction, there was not just extraction of resources, there was extraction of people.
Exploitation of people. Yes.
This did not happen without the local people making it possible. There
Yes.
were local individuals who made sure or made it possible for this extraction to happen. You don't just
Yes.
come in and take over like that. There's somebody who gives you, somebody who makes a way for you on the local side. So if we're saying that the same thing is replicating itself in 2024, where there are nations around the world for who this extraction continues, today in the name of debt, today in the name of, aid, and the neo-colonialization that we're talking about, then I put it to you that there's still local people who are allowing that to happen. They can see exactly what is going on. They know what is happening. But the personal benefit that was there 60 years ago still remains a source of motivation today. So in as much as they know what is going on, the personal benefits that they get far outweighs any other kind of attention that they're going to pay to millions of people in a population. That the millions of people whose families went and became slaves across the pond, today it's a different kind of slavery. But it still is that there are local individuals who are making it possible. They are in the minority, but they have the power, and so they continue to do it.
I agree. That's why I'm agreeing with you and I disagree with Eric. You see, they do not see it. And if they do, and I don't think they do, they are very happy with the status quo.
But that's what
So
makes
they
it
are
worse
not,
for me.
they are not change agents.
That's what makes it worse for me.
That's why I'm saying that the center of gravity of our politics has changed.
But that's what
And
makes
if you want to understand it, Gen Z.
I get it, but this is why I'm saying that it makes it worse, Jimmy, is because, and I keep saying that, you know something, you are aware of it, that's bad enough. But being aware of it and still continuing to do it, for me, makes it worse. That you are very aware of the detriment. You think the people who were passing off families of people in the slave trade in the 1800s, 1900s, you think they didn't know how bad it was?
They knew.
Did. But the personal gain far outweighed any other kind of, shame that they would have felt.
Always.
It's the same thing today. That there are people who know that Kenya continues to be in the shackles of debt. They know that the corruption is bad, but they also know that they will not get caught because nobody's going to put them to task. For me, that makes it worse. That you are very aware how detrimental this is to the people of Kenya. You are aware, but you still continue to do it because the personal gain far outweighs any kind of shame that you will feel.
Correct.
And you've been allowed to get away with it. So they are aware. It's so much more
So
worse.
you're in agreement with me?
I agree that they know what's happening. They know how bad it is.
Yes.
But they still continue to do it. For me, that's why you should go to the gallows. You know. And you still continue to do it.
Now you brought in a new thing, which is they should not get away with it.
No.
Right. So, again, fundamentally, there's history to that. We allowed the colonialists to get away with it when we got independence. We allowed the home guards, who you're talking about, because those are similar to the home guards, to get away with it. In fact, they became administrators
Yep.
in
You
new
put
government.
them in government.
We put them in government.
Yes.
Right? Every single turn. Today, you have impunity in our faces. You have an IG and a police force that has decided the law and courts are irrelevant. They are perpetuating anarchy as though they have a monopoly of it. All right? They are told to appear in court. They don't appear. They are told to produce people. They don't produce them. And they get away with it. And tomorrow's a new day. So listen, it is something in us. And when you start saying you want people to be held for account, you're told, when you move to your revenge, the country is more important to go forward than backwards. You're given all sorts of reasons as to why. So we are our own worst enemy. We have allowed it, right? And I think in principle, when Jomo Kenyatta took power, he said, we forgive, but we should not forget what has happened to us. Somewhere, that sentence has been abused for the last 60 years. It has been abused. We forgive, but we do not forget. We not only have forgotten, we have forgiven, and we have just moved on.
Have we?
We have tried to move on, and it is now eating us.
Again, have we even tried to move on? You see, we talk of imperialism because that's what it was. European, not British, European. And if you look at the companies that came here, part of the reason why, whether they went to India here, they had access to a lot of power. Their governments supported them. Now, individuals may have grown rich, but so did the country.
Yes.
Fundamental difference. The leadership that we have gets richer, the country gets poorer.
You see, we adopted, that's why I go historically, the Mzungu method here, the colonizer's method. He came here to extract, exploit, and dominate. He didn't come here to make the African rich.
No.
No.
They still don't.
It was so that they become rich.
Yep.
And they, meaning all of them, not just the leadership. That is still there today.
Yes.
There is a fundamental belief. And, I hope I am challenged that the so-called previous colonizers believe that they maintain their high standard of living at our
expense.
Our expense.
Yes.
The colonizer never left.
Never left. He's still here.
But
And we still have the chain. And he still has the traders, the home guards,
the facility.
the vanguards.
so we're in agreement, Jimmy.
That what? I'm saying
system.
is half these people, just like the ones who were saying that Kenya is not ready for him. There's no African that can rule. You know, some of those people who were saying that literally believed it. All right?
Genuinely.
Today, genuinely believed it. Today, we have people that you're talking about are my friends, right? Who this conversation to them, it's like, what are they talking about? What are they talking about?
They're in
See, this is
denial.
the way.
Yes,
Jimmy.
They're in denial.
They're in denial.
They'll even tell you,
But not that
Kenya's
they're
too
not
small.
seeing
Kenyans are this. Kenya's a poor country. What do we do? We just have to be on our knees. No, I'm telling you.
My point, Jimmy.
You'll be very...
They are aware. They are in denial.
Are they?
Yes.
They are aware that times have changed.
Clinically so.
They are in denial.
and
And they are in denial purposely because they know that accepting means that they disrupt
lose.
themselves and they lose.
Absolutely. But what did we
And that's
see?
why we
On
saw,
that-
that's why we saw the fraud-based, broad-based, whatever coalition coming together.
That one, I would argue with you, Eric.
Bas.
Yes.
But what did we see? I mean, look at situations whereby the status quo was going to be disrupted. And you can call me controversial or say whatever you want to say.
Yes.
But when the status quo was disrupted,
Yes.
where they would call particular leaders on the African continent strong men,
Yes.
they would get rid of them, Gaddafi being one of them.
Yes.
That they said, you can actually promote, you can actually create, you can actually develop your own wealth. And it was anathema to the people who said, no, we can't have this kind of thinking on the African continent.
Yes.
So we get rid of you.
Yes.
Today we see the same thing still being propagated.
Yes.
That when somebody will stand up and say, no, we cannot have corruption. We cannot have people disappeared. We cannot have children not go to school. We cannot have a health system which does not work. What do? We abduct you.
Yes.
And we try to keep you silent. It is the same manner
We
of
disappear
thinking.
you.
We disappear you.
But you know,
Try to keep you quiet because you cannot be allowed to disrupt the status quo, which allows us to continue to extract.
Yes.
the term disappearing and to disappear people began in Argentina. Now, there's always the thought that this is what happens when something happens over a long period of time, you actually get to believe that it can't change. Actually, it can change. Because the people who preceded us in this there's a level of brutality and inhumane treatment of citizens that the Argentinians had that we haven't gotten there. We shouldn't get there. But when you see what we've seen in the not too distant past, it's not that dissimilar.
It's not far away either.
No, it's not far away. Many of them believed this. Some died. They thought they had gotten away. People who are young then, you suddenly find it's come to your doorstep. You're now a grandfather. You were here on this date. This is what you did. And this family has been looking for their loved ones and they've never found them. Please come and explain to us. At the most inconvenient time in their lives, this not has happened, is continuing to happen. I think we've reached the hour.
Yeah, let's go to the news.
This is a
Jimmy, stay on for
fantastic
the next one.
conversation.
Okay? Stay on for the next one because we're saying this is civil education, civic awareness. And so we can see if we are ready for the next phase and to finally liberate our country.
Yes.
Okay? And then you'll tell us how your thinking is different from your friends' thinking. Yours.
Gladly.
Okay.
This insistence on friends.
Gladly. It's buddies. All of them. Kenya's